All right, so as we all know, buying a home can be expensive and a risky proposition. And whether you're a first-time home buyer or a seasoned homeowner, there are many costs to factor in when you are shopping for a home, as well as some of the common pitfalls you will want to avoid. And one of the most overlooked parts of any real estate purchase is the appraisal contingency. So today, let's discuss not only what an appraisal is, but how it plays a major role in most, if not all, real estate purchases. So how does it all work? Well, once you've made an offer on a home and it's accepted by the seller, you are both bound to that contract. And as the buyer, if you back out for any reason not allowed by the contract, you run the risk of forfeiting and losing your earnest money, which could be thousands of dollars. And no one wants that. This is why it is so important to understand all aspects of the real estate contract and what you are agreeing to. It's also why an appraisal contingency is your ally and another great reason for us to discuss it today. So why is an appraisal contingency so important? Let's use this example. Let's say you, as the buyer, write a contract with an appraisal contingency attached. This contingency will let you, as the buyer, walk away from the contract with your earnest money if the home doesn't appraise for the amount you agreed to pay. Therefore, keeping yourself from losing thousands of dollars. Pretty cool, right? All right, so now that we know that, what exactly are contingencies? Contingencies are conditions that must be met before a real estate contract is legally binding, and each includes a specified time frame. An appraisal contingency is a clause that allows home buyers to back out of their contract if the appraised value of the property is less than the agreed upon purchase price. So when do you need an appraisal contingency? If you are planning on financing your home purchase and a lender is involved, you will need a home appraisal, and in most cases, you should consider an appraisal contingency as part of your contract. Now, a little known fact is even if you are a cash buyer, you too can still add an appraisal contingency to your offer. It's important to note in this particular case, either you or your real estate agent will have to hire an independent appraiser to appraise the property. However, an appraisal contingency is not a requirement for a real estate contract if you are truly a cash buyer. Okay, so who pays for the appraisal? Simply put, the appraisal is typically paid for by the buyer, and the average cost of an appraisal can run anywhere between $300 and $500 and will be most commonly paid at closing. And in most cases, except for those who are truly cash buyers and not using traditional lending to purchase their home, the lender will hire a third-party, state-licensed and registered appraiser to determine the fair market value of the home. The appraiser then decides the value of the home based on the home's general condition, location, and comparative sales, or comps, in the area. So how long does an appraisal contingency take? Of course, each real estate transaction is different. However, your lender or real estate agent can provide guidance as to when the specific timing of your appraisal contingency will go into effect. But generally, you should allow for 2 to 4 weeks for the appraiser to visit the home and complete the report, or complete a drive-by appraisal in special circumstances. Never forget, real estate transactions are always a fluid process. Different loans take different qualifications, and some seasons will be busier than others for inspectors. So what happens if the appraisal comes in low? This is one of the biggest questions I get all the time from buyers. So the deadline for invoking an appraisal contingency is the date by which any claims made by the buyer must be made as stated in the purchase agreement. That's a lot of words there, so let's talk about what that means. So if the appraisal comes in too low, the buyer can petition for a second appraisal. If you go this route, be sure to make sure your lender is aware of the reasons you think the home is worth more. Maybe that's recent comparable properties that have sold in the area, or maybe the appraiser just missed something of value that is not easily visible, like radiant floor heating. Sometimes a second appraisal can keep a contract alive. Now, let's say you've had 2 appraisals and the appraised value is still too low. You then have 4 options. Option 1, you as the buyer can simply agree to bring more money to the table to bridge the difference between the appraised value and the real estate contract purchase price. Just note, if you go this route, the money you agree to bridge that gap is owed at closing and is paid out of your pocket. Option 2, you can negotiate with the seller, and the seller may agree to reduce the purchase price of the home to meet the appraised lower value. Option 3, if you've used an appraisal gap rider as part of your contract, you may already have agreed upon an amount of money you, as the buyer, will pay over the appraised price if the home appraisal comes in lower. For example, let's say you have an agreed upon purchase price for a home of $250,000, and your real estate agent advises you to try an appraisal gap rider as part of your contract. Now, let's say you chose to add an appraisal gap rider of $1,500 to your contract. If you go this route, you are telling the seller that if the home doesn't appraise for the full agreed upon purchase price, that you as the buyer are willing to pay $1,500 over and above the appraised value of the home. So, in this particular example, if you purchased the home for $250,000 and as part of your contract you have an appraisal gap rider of $1,500 and then the home only appraises for $240,000, you then would be responsible to pay, as the buyer, $241,500 for the home rather than the initial purchase price of $250,000. However, it's important to remember that since the bank has only appraised the home for $240,000, you must come up with the other $1,500 out of pocket and pay that difference at closing. Option 4. Both parties, both the buyer and the seller, simply agree to split the difference in any combination to make up the agreed upon purchase price. Now, as the buyer and the seller, if you cannot come to an agreement with those 4 options, the contract will be terminated. So what happens if you waive your appraisal contingency altogether? In this particular case, this is where you agree to pay the full amount of the contracted price even if the appraisal comes in low. Waiving the home appraisal contingency clause is rare, but there are exceptions. You might waive an appraisal if the determined higher or lower value does not have an influence on your ability to purchase the home or obtain a loan, which is usually the case of a larger down payment. Another important note is if you waive your appraisal contingency, it can be a smart tactic for standing out in an extremely competitive seller's market. Doing so could eliminate a seller's fear that the deal might fall through if the property doesn't appraise for the initial asking price. This is often considered a very beneficial approach to win the home in a multiple offer situation. You should understand, however, that this is taking a risk. If the home appraisal is lower than the agreed upon purchase price, the contract is still valid and you will be expected to complete the sale, or you could lose your earnest money or possibly even run the risk of litigation. For example, if you choose to waive your appraisal contingency altogether and you are seeking a $300,000 mortgage, but the appraisal comes in at $290,000, the mortgage lender is only able to finance $290,000. This leaves you, as the buyer, responsible for paying the remaining $10,000 out of pocket, as well as the down payment and other closing costs. You can see how this can get expensive. So why is this all important to you? While all contingencies are relevant to the home buying process, the appraisal contingency is one of the most important safeguards available to home buyers. And having an appraisal contingency can help you confidently buy your new home, even in a demanding real estate market. This piece of real estate contract states that the buyer will only purchase the home if the appraisal is equal or above the sales price. The appraisal contingency gives you the option to negotiate a lower sales price or walk away from the deal. Catch you guys next time.